Welcome back to the Triple Threat Podcast. My name is William and today we are joined by Reilly of ATL Sports Hub on Instagram. But before we get into anything, just want to preemptively warn you guys, there might be some technical difficulties today. If there are, I apologize. I am not at the setup at home, as you might tell if you watched the podcast before. So just a heads up on that one, but hopefully we'll have a smooth one today. So Reilly, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, Ishan, William. Hey, thanks so much for having me on the Triple Threat Podcast. I appreciate it. So I run this Instagram page on all Atlanta sports. I do a lot of Hawks basketball recently, but I've done a lot of Braves baseball in the past because that's really been the most prominent team. And then I do find myself still doing some Falcons coverage despite some disappointing seasons and years past. But yeah, I've been having fun doing that. And I did a podcast for Atlanta sports for about 2 years up until I transitioned over to another podcast for my school. So it's been a lot of fun doing a lot of the same stuff you guys are doing. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Before we get into how you start your Instagram, let's just talk about some Atlanta sports because I think that's what the people want to hear. So, Ishan, why don't you start us off with some Hawks basketball, seeing as that's the relevant Atlanta sports team right now.
Yeah, of course. So it was definitely unfortunate, Reilly, to see us go down like that in 6 games, but it was just a really fun playoff run to watch as a fan, as a lifelong fan. And it was really great to see Trae Young, to see Bogey, to see Capella, Collins finally prove all the doubters wrong and make it that far, because we were an underdog going into the Knicks series. We were obviously an underdog going into Philly, and then we were an underdog going into Milwaukee. And while we didn't win the Milwaukee series, we still took them to 6 games. And you know what? They did it with a lot of swagger. They did it with a lot of confidence. And they left the Milwaukee series with 0 gas in the tank. They really gave it their all. So what were your thoughts on this playoff run?
It's a perfect way to put it, Ishan. I mean, they certainly did give it their all. I think it was a great playoff run. I also think it was a great season run. I mean, you look back to, I think it was February, this team's 14-20, bottom half of the East standings, and just really not having a good season. Looks like we were going to possibly be entering the lottery again, just not a good team. Trae was playing well. There were a couple of guys that were stepping up, having a good season, but Bogey was injured for a good bit of that season. A lot of guys were dealing with injury. We never really had a full healthy squad. And a lot of it too was kind of the controversy surrounding Lloyd Pierce and him being head coach. And so then we get rid of Lloyd Pierce. We bring in head coach Nate McMillan, and just the way the season turned around. I mean, you could give a lot of credit to Nate McMillan. I think he deserves a lot of credit. I also think the players and just the way they kind of rallied around Nate McMillan and then brought us all the way into May, into June, and gave us just one heck of a playoff run. I think the best playoff run I think the city of Atlanta has ever seen in terms of basketball. The way we defeated the odds against just the Knicks. I mean, we were counted out, but I think every sports writer, when I looked at their predictions, it was Knicks in 6. Stephen A had Knicks in 7. Everybody was going with New York. It was supposed to be this new era for New York. Playing basketball in New York is supposed to be really tough, but Trae, he stepped up. He had a game winner in his first ever playoff game. I don't know how many guys, I don't have the stat, but I don't know how many guys you can say hit a game winner in their first ever playoff game, especially in Madison Square Garden, one of the toughest places to play basketball. But we beat the Knicks in 5? Then we go on and we beat Philly in 7. And just the way we played against Philly, especially in game 1 again, Trae stepping up like he did. And Philly was the number 1 team in the East. They've been consistent all season long. And a lot of sports writers were saying, well, I don't even know if the Hawks will beat him if Joel Embiid doesn't even play, because there was this question about, will Joel play, because it's just the Hawks and he might take this series off and just save himself, save some gas in the tank for the following series. But even with Joel, the Hawks still beat him, and they really handed it to Philly. And I think we would have honestly beaten the Bucks had it not been for Trae Young's injury and had we had a healthy DeAndre Hunter. But obviously that's basketball. No team has really had a healthy squad all season. And there's a lot of teams who are missing key players. But had Trae not gone down, I think maybe the Bucks series would have gone a little different, but also they didn't have Giannis. So you got to keep that in mind. But no, I think it was a really, really fun run to watch. And I think a key part of this is the future for Atlanta Hawks basketball. I know we always say it is that these Atlanta teams will be bad. They've got young players, but I think it's really going to come into fruition now, because if you look at, and I'll pull it up right now, but if you look at the roster for the Hawks and just the guys we have and how young they are. Trae Young's 22, John Collins is 23, Cam Reddish 21, DeAndre Hunter 23, Kevin Huerter 22, Okongwu 20. I mean, all these guys have bright futures ahead. So I'm really, really excited about Hawks basketball.
Yeah, and one thing to maintain that future is locking up John Collins, and that's going to be kind of the topic for conversation going on. They locked up David Milne, obviously, before your contract. I think it was yesterday. But yeah. John Collins is going to be the X factor. It's going to be how much is he willing to take, how much does he want, how much is the contract going to be in the end. And the Hawks really got to find a middle ground, because obviously the salary cap is definitely a real thing, and luxury tax can hit you hard. So just your thoughts on the whole Collins situation. What do you think he wants, and what do you think he's actually going to get?
That's a good question. It'll certainly be an X factor this offseason. I think with Collins, though, him being a restricted free agent, we're kind of, as the Hawks organization, we're kind of in the best spot possible, in my opinion, because we can sit back and see what the other teams are willing to give Collins. And then we can kind of gauge the playing field. If there's no team out there that's really giving him what he wants in terms of money, we can say, hey, we'll give you this, and you can come play with Atlanta, a team that you had a lot of fun with this season, a team that made it almost to the NBA finals, made it to the conference finals, played 6 games against the Bucks. You can come back and be a part of this team, this young team with Okongwu, Trae, Huerter, some of these guys, or, you can go play on another team if they're going to offer you more money. So I think we're in a really interesting position with Collins. And I think if we do decide to let him walk, it's not going to hurt that bad as it would have last season, now that we have a DeAndre Hunter and a Cam Reddish that we know are proven and really good players. And I saw the quote, I believe, I forget who it was from, but I think some turmoil with Lloyd Pierce and, some factors leading up to his exit was actually the fact that he didn't really have a connection with Cam Reddish. Reddish is looked at as having possibly the highest ceiling on this Hawks team. I heard one guy say, and I think he was in the Hawks organization, and I'm going to have to look this up, but he said that Cam Reddish might even have a higher ceiling than Trae Young. Well, that doesn't exactly look to prove true to me right now, but Cam Reddish, I think we saw in that final game against the Bucks, he's a really strong basketball player, and Lloyd Pierce didn't have any sort of connection with him and wasn't really enhancing his game compared to Nate McMillan. So I think having Cam Reddish, having DeAndre Hunter, if John Collins decides to walk, will kind of soften the blow, having those guys. So it is what it is. I'm looking forward to see how it pans out. And I think, again, the Hawks are in a pretty good spot with the restricted free agency.
Ishan, do you have the salary cap numbers for the Hawks pulled up?
I can pull that up, but I did want to say just about Collins. He's obviously a big contributor, probably the second or third offensive option, depending on the game. It's a little flexible with Bogdanovic. But I think with Collins, he has said many times in the past couple of days that he wants to stay in Atlanta.
Yeah.
But he's also seen the type of money that De'Aaron Fox is making, for example, the type of money that Bam Adebayo, guys in his draft class that are probably a little bit better than him, but not too far, not too much better. He's seeing them getting paid $25 million plus each year. And even a guy like Jonathan Isaac, who's barely available for games, is getting paid around $17-18 million a year on a 4-year deal. So he definitely wants that 5-year, $120+ million contract. And it just puts us in a not so promising situation, because this team is not perfect. As good as they are, they still have a long way to go, and having that cap flexibility, having that ability to maybe dish out a small contract here or there or save up for a larger contract is so crucial. And I think that if Collins wants $30+ million, when we have to eventually re-sign Trae, Cam, Hunter, and then Okongwu afterwards, that's going to put us in a bad financial situation. So I think, Reilly, you said it best. We just need to gauge the playing field, see how other teams value him, and then we got to go from there. But if Collins wants too much money, it's good that we've stockpiled up on the front court, that we have some insurance.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, Ishan. I want to make sure that I don't downplay Collins's, value to the team. I mean, he was the second leading scorer. Trae Young had 25 a game this season. Collins had 17. So he's a good scorer. He's only in his fifth season. And he's playing good basketball. And I think he's still got a lot of improvement to make. I think he can still continue to be a good player for the Atlanta Hawks. I just don't think he's worth that max contract he's looking for. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I love Collins. I hope I'm wrong. I hope if he stays in Atlanta, if he goes somewhere else, he proves that he actually is worth that kind of money. But right now, I think the Hawks are going to be put in a bad spot if they do give out that kind of money to Collins.
Exactly. That's the one con that you have when you draft so well is you got to pay the players eventually. And if you set a precedent of paying players a market price or above market price, you're going to be paying that price a couple more times down the line. So this contract really gets set the tone for this team. They can't just say, let's bring the squad back together for this front and back, because in all honesty, the Hawks, they're not a contender. They're not in the same league as some of the upper echelon teams in the NBA. I mean, they lost to the Bucks in 6. I mean, granted, they were pretty banged up, but the Bucks, without much depth, without not much of a front court, without Giannis, they dominated the paint. They took the series in 6, and without Giannis, I think that really shows you how far the Hawks still have to go, because the NBA is very tough, and if you just want to run it back and win a championship, it's not really going to happen with this roster. So they got to be smart about the situation. I have faith in the Hawks. They've had a good front office. They've done a great job drafting so far, but it's just going to be interesting to see how they handle the situation. So we'll talk about the series itself, the Bucks versus the Hawks, because it's probably the most interesting one to talk about so far.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to talk about the series. And I agree with you that, we're not necessarily a championship team with this roster, but I don't think we're far off. I think some little moves here and there, maybe just some developmental, pieces of some of these guys. Like I think Trae Young still has tons of room to improve. Same with DeAndre Hunter, same with Cam Reddish. So if these guys continue to make leaps into their second, third, fourth year, I don't think we're very far off from a championship. But in terms of the series, there was a couple of things, especially with the Bucks front court, the way we were dominated from Brook Lopez, that killed us. And the defensive switching, I mean, the way Brook Lopez was able to stay on Kevin Huerter and then force Kevin Huerter to pretty much disappear in game 5 and 6 was tough for us too. So an overall shaky series. I think the series technically ended when Trae Young stepped on the referee's foot, because that was just a brutal blow for Atlanta. We ended up losing that game when I think if Trae Young never went down, we would end up closing out that game. So it was tough to watch as an Atlanta fan, but at the same time, I found myself appreciating that we were even sitting in the Eastern Conference Finals in the first place. So compared to the Braves, that was one piece, because I was really disappointed in the Braves when we were in kind of the Eastern Conference Final equivalent back in October. And the fact that we blew a 3-1 lead there was certainly tough. Here, it was a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah. I know we went into the series on the podcast. Ishan and I said the key to victory for the Hawks to win the front court battle with Giannis being out, and they weren't able to do it. It hurt them. Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez played exceptionally well, and I don't want to discredit them at all, because Brook Lopez turned back time and went back to his Brooklyn days. Yeah. He looked really exceptional in the paint, just playing great big man basketball. Not the typical Brook Lopez we've seen just shooting from 3, but credit to them. But I really was disappointed in Okongwu, Collins, and Capella, because those are some big guys. They've been dominating the paint in a lot of series and playing really good basketball again. Collins was heavily impactful in those offensive rebounds against Philly. So I was just a little disappointed to see them get outshined by Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez. So I know Ishan probably got some thoughts on the series himself.
Yeah, I will say just a lot of credit to Lopez, especially on the defensive end, being able to play the drop coverage really well against an Atlanta team that's pretty heavily reliant on the pick and roll, being able to neutralize Trae's floaters, or being able to keep Collins and Capella out of the paint with his just defensive monstrosities. But I think that, this Bucks team is a really good perimeter team. We were missing Hunter, arguably our best perimeter defender. So I think with Hunter back, as with Reddish developing as a defender because he has the frame, he has the physical tools to do so, and hopefully, making a couple of roster adjustments, just small ones here and there, to just bolster the perimeter defense a little bit. That will help us go a long way, especially against a team like Milwaukee or Brooklyn or even Philadelphia, because Seth Curry, man, he was torching us at times.
Oh, yeah. That was tough.
Yeah,
he and Chris Middleton have looked exceptional against the Hawks defense.
Mm-hmm. I will say one guy that I'm interested in, a guy that I wouldn't necessarily say fits in with the time frame of the rest of the team, but is still decently valuable, is Danilo Gallinari. So he's 32 already. His primary position is power forward. As much as I want to say small forward, he generally plays a lot of power forward, and that's a crowded front court, especially if you bring Collins back. Mm-hmm. And he's the highest paid player on the team at $19.5 million per year. I think he's on a 2-year deal.
He is.
So what are your thoughts on maybe letting go of Gallinari to increase some of that flexibility this offseason?
I wouldn't be opposed to it. That being said, though, I am highly impressed with how Gallinari played in the playoffs. There was times where I was a little irritated with his shot selection, but there was also double the times I was really impressed with how he kind of sprung us back into games. I mean, he was the guy, he felt like Mr. Old reliable at times. Mm-hmm. And he's got an interesting way of shooting the basketball. It looks very uncoordinated.
He just always looks uncoordinated. I think that's just
it. He looks very uncoordinated, but he puts the ball in the basket. So that's really all you can ask for.
For sure.
So he's a bucket. He's a walking bucket. But at the same time, Ishan, you're right. He's the highest paid guy on this roster, $19.5 million. Another guy that I just don't think is quite worth $19.5 million. So if we decide to kind of clear house with him, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But at the same time, I do heavily appreciate what he's done for us in the playoffs. And I do think he would be a good piece for us next season. Granted, being 32, 33 years old, you're only going to start to see a decline in guys like him in his game now. So it's an interesting line we got to walk, but I think Travis Schlenk and kind of his basketball expertise will make the right call there.
Yeah, I'm definitely confident in Travis Schlenk. When he first made the trade for Luka for Trae Young, I think both of you guys knew my initial thoughts on that. I was just disappointed. I was almost crying. I was like, I've seen Luka for so long. I love this guy. I can't believe the Suns took Bagley. And look, they've both panned out, but I'm so happy we have Trae Young now. He's definitely played at Luka's level or even better throughout the playoffs, and he's been able to take over this team. But I think Travis Schlenk, I'm very confident in his decision-making. He's not complacent, which is one thing that I like, because he could have just said, you know what, this next year's draft class is good. We could get a Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green type guy, and we'll just tank again. But he made the right moves to keep Trae Young happy, to gauge how John Collins, Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter can contribute to a winning franchise. And I think that he will be persistent. He's not going to just try to run it back. He's not going to be complacent. I think if he doesn't like how Gallo fits in with a long-term plan or his long-term plan, he will make that very clear. He'll trade Gallinari. And if he finds some free agents that he likes, especially now that Tony Snell's contract is expired and he's going to be off the payroll, he's going to go for them. He's going to pursue them. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him because he's been just a great, great guy for the team.
Yeah, huge shout out to Travis Schlenk. And Ishan, I got actually a post on my page about fans similar to yourself when the whole Luka trade went down. I went back and went in the Twitter archives and found some old articles written too. And there was some heavy stuff. People were calling it the top 10 worst trade of all time.
Oh yeah.
And there was definitely there was some heavy stuff written about Trae Young and how he's just going to be a disaster and a colossal bust. But I also found an article where Trae Young said he's using it as motivation, still is using some of those quotes and articles as motivation. So panned out for the best.
Exactly. And I just want to touch on one more thing about Gallinari. I think it kind of aligns with this team's financial future. 1 year left. They don't have a lot of players coming up in free agency besides John Collins this offseason. So they can probably afford another year. And that leadership and the intelligence that you really can't put a value on, because he had that game-sealing steal against Philly, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. He's been influential on so many ends of the court. I mean, I know he's not a great defender, but his intelligence has been instrumental for this Hawks team. And if they want to win a championship, leadership is definitely up there with some of the most important things, especially for this young roster. So heading into this offseason, what do you think the Hawks should do? Any players you want to see them sign? I know Chris Dunn was that kind of perimeter defense kind of guy they were looking at last offseason. Made a couple moves last offseason to bring the team up into playoff contention. Mm-hmm. What could they do this offseason to bring themselves into championship contention?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. What should they do this offseason? I think a big piece of this offseason is just going to be Collins and seeing where that money falls. If we decide to give Collins that contract, that's one scenario, and then we put a lot of money in that. I wouldn't be like heavily opposed to that situation, but at the same time, I do want to possibly see some other moves go down. I think Travis Schlenk has a couple of trades up his sleeve. Granted, I really couldn't tell you what that's going to look like, or kind of what those moves are going to look like. But I think some of those Chris Dunn trades, some of those signings for those guys can kind of be break or bust. I mean, Chris Dunn really didn't impress me this season. Granted, he was down on the bench for a good bit of it, but even in the playoffs when he would come in, it wasn't that kind of point guard that I think we could use coming off the bench. But at the same time, Lou Williams was that guy, especially in the playoffs. Lou Williams came in and making that trade midseason, getting rid of Rajon Rondo. That's kind of the basketball expertise I was talking about with Travis Schlenk. I mean, seeing something that needs to be fixed, just a small something, it's not something that all Hawks fans are talking about, but Schlenk sees that if we're going to kind of step up and be in the playoffs, we're going to need a guy who can come off the bench, who has that experience, isn't afraid of the big moment. And that guy was Lou Williams. So I think little trades like that, little signings like that, for little money too, and getting some of those missing pieces that are just small pieces. I don't think we need to do anything blockbuster this offseason. Granted, I'm always a fan of some blockbuster stuff going on, so I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I think just little moves like that. And as I look more into it, I'll continue to update on the page. But I'm really excited to see how this offseason pans out, and I'm excited to see especially what we do with Collins. That's my big thing.
Yeah, if you don't know ATL Sports on Instagram, I'll make sure to link that in the description after this live is finished. So make sure to check him out. He's been on his grind. We'll talk about your Instagram page in a little bit, but let's move on to some Atlanta Falcons, because Ishan and I don't know a lot about baseball, so we're not going to try and act like we know what we're talking about. So let's go into something that's a little bit more familiar to us and talk about some Falcons football. So let's talk about this offseason, because it's been pretty big for the Falcons. Probably the biggest offseason in quite a long time. They had the 4th overall pick. They had Julio Jones, and they hired a new coach. So let's start off with Arthur Smith, since that was the first thing that happened. I love this hire personally. I mean, I hate it. I'm a Saints fan, but I thought that was a great hire for you guys. Best coach available this offseason. What do you think about Arthur Smith, and what is he going to do to this team?
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. Arthur Smith, I think, is going to come in and be a great change and just scenery for this team. Especially, it reminds me kind of similar to how McMillan was that change of scenery. But I think at the same time, he's really going to propel this offense. Matt Ryan has been needing someone like Arthur Smith to come in. I also think our run game, I mean, if you look at the stats with Derrick Henry before and after Arthur Smith, there was a huge jump in his rush yards per game. And I don't have the exact stat, but I remember when all this went down, I went and find those little nuggets. And I think it's apparent how much of an effect he had on Tennessee. And I think in this head coaching role here in Atlanta, I think he's going to have a huge effect. And I liked his response to Julio Jones being gone. That was one of my favorite quotes I saw so far this offseason was, I never coached the guy I could, give a blank. He really couldn't care. He wasn't one of his players. He's just focused on the guys we have in the building right now. And I think we have a lot of good pieces. With that 4th overall pick, taking Pitts, I like it a lot. I think Pitts is a great player. I think he might have been probably the best overall player possibly in that spot right there. I think the defense is going to be still a soft spot for us. this season. But Pitts is a strong player. He kind of fills a hole in some ways. I don't want to say he fills the entire hole, but he at least softens the blow to a Julio Jones departure, and is going to fill in and try to add some depth to our receiving unit. So I'm a big fan of what the Falcons have done this offseason. I don't think they're going to necessarily be a top playoff team, a team that's winning every Sunday, but I do think they're going to be fun to watch, and a team that's certainly now with Arthur Smith at the helm, a team that's on the rise for years to come.
And if you don't know how intelligent Arthur Smith is, here are some nuggets for you. Matt LaFleur is the OC before him. He was, I think they're around the 20th, 25th around in offense when Matt LaFleur was in charge. Look what he did in Green Bay, back-to-back seasons of 13-3. He's been exceptional. Mm-hmm. But Arthur Smith, he has made this Tennessee offense the number one offense in points per game, the number two offense in yards per game. I mean, during his time, he has been nothing but impressive for Tennessee.
And William, this is with Ryan Tannehill in the pocket. That's my
disrespectful. And Ryan Tannehill.
No, but I mean, come on now. This is with Tannehill in the pocket. We got Matt Ryan, former MVP. This is what excites me so much about Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
I would argue Ryan Tannehill is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan.
Correct. Okay. We got some issues going on now, William.
I'm just saying. Chris Sims also agrees. I know Ishan respects his opinion on quarterbacks. So Ryan Tannehill's a great guy.
I still got Matty Ice. I can't do my quarterback.
They're pretty equal, but I'd take Ryan Tannehill just a little bit ahead. But both great quarterbacks. I see your point on that though. But Arthur Smith, people get this misconception a lot that he's this genius run game coordinator. He's a passing first guy. Mm-hmm. But what's so great about him is that he had Derrick Henry, and he was willing to adapt his play style to match his personnel. And that ability to match personnel to offensive scheme is something that not a lot of offensive minds can do. And the fact that he was able to design an offense around A.J. Brown, the play action pass with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill's deep threat ability was just something that was spectacular to watch. And I think that if he can adapt that to Atlanta, especially considering Atlanta does not have that much of a running game. I know they signed Mike Davis. I know they got J.B. Hawkins from undrafted. A little bit of some character concerns there, but definitely a player with some talent and some speed for sure. Sound like a Raheem Mostert. Looking out for a fantasy sleeper. I like J.B. Hawkins a little bit. But if he can design his offense, watch out. 12 personnel. Hayden Hurst line up in lines at tight end. Kyle Pitts as a wide receiver outside. I think that's going to be kind of the systems they're going to be looking for, 2 tight ends, because what Pitts did best in college was catch from the outside. He wasn't as good lining up inside, but they have Hayden Hurst. So I think the 12 personnel system is going to be really important for this Falcons team. But who do you see coming in as that second receiver behind Calvin Ridley to fill in that second spot if they're going to run 12 personnel? Because there's a couple guys in this roster, but no one that can really fill a Julio Jones-sized hole.
Yeah, no one that can nearly fill Julio Jones-sized hole. I think Pitts will be good. Ridley's going to be a beast. I think Russell Gage, honestly, impressed me a lot in the season. I think he'll be a good guy. He's fast. He can get out into the seams, and he's a strong receiver. I think he might be one guy. Christian Blake is another that we saw. These are some guys that really, you never know. They could have a breakout season. They could be worse than they were last season. But I got faith in Russell Gage especially. I think Calvin Ridley's going to have himself, with Julio now out of the picture, have himself one of his best seasons so far, probably his best season so far. So I'm not too worried about the receiving staff with Ridley, Pitts, and Gage. It's certainly not Julio, Ridley, and some of the other receiving staffs we've seen in Atlanta before. But I think Ridley, Gage, and Pitts is going to be a pretty kick-butt receiving staff.
It certainly will be. But let's move on to the defense. I know you talked a little bit about that as a soft spot. They brought in Dean Pease, an exceptional hire, brought him out of retirement, one of the best defensive coordinators of all time. Great person. Smith worked with him in Tennessee. What do you mean about this hire, and how is he going to affect this defense that has got some talent in some spots, but has got a lot of holes in some others? And I know Ishan definitely knows about that.
Yeah, no, Pease is a great hire. And I think there's certainly some holes in this defense. You saw the Falcons went out and signed, 3 defensive linemen. So they're definitely concerned, I think, about their interior defensive linemen. Grady Jarrett's a beast. He's going to be a beast in this upcoming season. But other than him, I mean, you got Davison, who I think you're familiar with.
Yeah, Tyler Davidson. He's a really good player.
No, he's good.
He's more of a third string defensive tackle, but he can definitely step in and make some impact. So definitely he's a good rotational piece, and D-line depth is always needed. So
yeah, we got Kaminsky. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. We got Marlon Davidson. We got John Kaminsky too, who we drafted a couple years back. I'm still waiting on him to make a jump. I think he could be a good player if he could make a jump. Then you look at the linebackers. I mean, Dante Fowler, Stephen Means, not a whole lot of great names there. But then you look at the inside linebackers. You got guys like Deion Jones still coming back, Luke Wan, Brandon Copeland, Michael Walker. So I think there's definitely a couple names still on this defense that are going to be bid like they always have been, like Deion Jones and Grady Jarrett. But I think a big question mark on this defense is going to be who can make the jump. Is it going to be, John Kaminsky on the line? Is it going to be Foya Lukawan? Is he going to continue to make steps in the right direction? I think that's going to be a big question mark. I'm excited, though, to see, as you said, William, how Dean Pease kind of handles this, what kind of moves we might have to make midseason, depending on how we had, or depending on how our start went and what our goals are for the end of the season.
Last kind of thing for both Ishan and you, of course, Reilly, but who is a little under the radar guy that you think is going to break out this season? I think last season, people might say Bloody Ray Wilson stepping in, playing pretty well. I thought he was a pretty solid guy. Came out from pretty much nowhere and played a pretty solid role. So who would you say is going to be someone to look out for in this Falcons roster, a name that you might not have heard about?
Not necessarily a name you might not have heard about, but I like AJ Terrell a lot. I really like him. I'm still waiting on him to break out a little bit more. Obviously, we used our first round pick on him 2 years ago out of Clemson. And so he's one person I think could really break out. Ishan, you got anybody else?
Yeah, I was looking more at the linebackers, especially Michael Walker. I think he was our 4th round pick in 2020.
Out of Colorado, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been. It was. Yeah. But he had a season, had limited reps, but definitely showed some flashes.
Yeah.
With Walker, Jones, and Alakwan. So I'm excited to see Walker's development and Foye's development. And then I know he's a rookie, but I think this was a slight reach, but I do like Richie Grant. He's a guy that I can see benefiting from Dean Pease's leadership, kind of a do-it-all safety that can do a little bit of everything but isn't exceptional. Okay. But we don't have Keanu Neal anymore. We don't have Ricardo Allen. We don't have KZ anymore. So I'd like to see him step up and be a pretty impactful rookie.
Yeah, he's going to be thrust into the limelight immediately. And that's going to be something that is going to be very interesting to see because he's been learning on the job.
It could be a good or a bad thing for him. That's the thing. I don't really know. One more guy, Brandon Copeland, who he added the linebacker crew this offseason, should be good. I've heard good things about him, and he's really excited. I think I saw one quote that all the linebackers are already in conversations, obviously, with Dean Pease and really, really thrilled to work under his scheme because they think it's going to play to their benefit. So I'm excited to see how the defense steps up this year for sure.
Yeah, and Terrell is a great player. His man-to-man skills are something that's exceptional. One thing you really worry about is his ball skills. And in a division with Mike Evans and Michael Thomas, ball skills is kind of important to be good at.
100%.
But against a lot of other good receivers, especially the ones that are undersized, he should have a field day against. But I mean, you saw the ball skills against Jamar Chase. And he was in Jamar Chase's hip pocket all game. But the fact that Jamar Chase can just win every 50-50, make it an 80-20, just made it look like Terrell was getting torched, even though he was doing good coverage. So as we finish off, let's talk about you. So you run an Instagram page. You've been doing this since 2018. Talk about why you started doing this and why you wanted to become a news hub for Atlanta sports.
Yeah, it was kind of random. It was March of 2018. I started doing this. So early 2018, I kind of put the page together, and it's been a lot of fun. It started off really different than where it is now. And as I said, it started off kind of on 3 platforms. I was originally just doing the Instagram page, and then I really started to boost it, started doing a weekly podcast, about an hour and a half in length. So it was a long podcast, and I would talk only usually by myself about Atlanta sports, at least for the first 10, 15 episodes. Then I started bringing on guests, and then in November of 2018, I introduced a website, and I had all my buddies and some Atlanta natives and people who were just fans of some of the certain teams, some of them fans of 4 teams, some of them fans of just the Braves. And I had them writing articles, and a lot of them were really, really talented writers. So that was a fun website to run. But just with the stuff I'm doing at my school now with the podcast there, I've transitioned over to just running the Instagram, which is fun. I mean, I say it's different than where it is or where it started. And I started it kind of how a lot of people will start fan pages and continue to run these fan pages, is like giving you just paragraphs on paragraphs of what happened. Like, okay, Braves won, 4-3 today. Ronald Acuna went 2 for 4, and Freddie Freeman had a 2-run blast, and blah, 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 blah. Pitcher pitched 7 innings, 100-something pitches, and I'll just give you the whole rundown. And then I realized, like, it's not really what people are looking for in this page. Anybody who's going to read all that already watched the game, was kind of the realization that I came to. And anybody who's going to read all that, is already looking at game highlights and doing their own research themselves. So I kind of transitioned away from that. And so the page now is more of, I like to call it kind of a community, kind of a place for these Atlanta sports fans to come and talk about stuff and interact with posts and just have fun. And I'll do, polls on the story, and I'll have people submit opinions and get all the other followers to vote on the opinions, stuff like that, to just kind of make it more fun and more of a fun environment, I guess, for lack of better words. So that's kind of what I've been doing now. And one fun part is I'll send a screenshot to you guys, but I'm introducing some new merch that's going to be dropping. I did 2 merch.
I saw it.
Or yeah, they've been pretty successful so far. This time we're doing strictly t-shirts, and I wanted to introduce them while Atlanta sports was hot and the Hawks were on the run. Now it's going to be a little too late, but I'm still thinking that people are going to be interested in them because I got a lot of requests. So I'm excited. Those will be dropping sometime in July. I'm getting the proof t-shirt, the one that's going to really tell me how it looks and how the material feels tomorrow. So once I get that, if I'm satisfied with it, I'll place the bulk order. And so I'm excited. If you'd like to order one, reach out to me, reach out to the page ATL Sports Hub on Instagram. But I'm really thrilled about that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, I saw the design for that.
Oh yeah, that's right, Ishan. I got you covered. Don't worry.
So I'm definitely excited to finally get some merch. And I think one thing that you've emphasized, that you obviously talked about, was community, especially with things like the merch. I remember during the podcast era, you'd have just anyone that wanted to call in, could call in, give their opinion, give their input at times. And then obviously the polls, the comment section, having a multitude of writers, just anyone could go and write. I think that was a big aspect of it. So yeah, how did getting everybody involved really boost your platform as an analyst?
Yeah, that's always been a big emphasis for me, was letting everyone get involved, because I wanted to maintain that kind of community feel, that aspect, since I started this. So having guys like, just random sports fans who were either 2 years younger than me, maybe in my same grade, sometimes adults I knew through various ventures, come on and just be like, hey, the Hawks suck and this is why, or hey, the Hawks are actually going to win the NBA finals this year, despite being in last place. Just wait, having people come on and give their kind of sometimes really wrong and out there opinions, and sometimes actually have a interesting conversation and find some people who do have, like you two, have some great opinions and some things that are really interesting to say. So that's kind of what I've been emphasizing. And letting anyone who wanted to write was another thing. Obviously I would do one read over the article, make sure it was fit for the site. But besides that, I definitely wanted to emphasize letting anyone who wanted to come on and write and talk about Atlanta sports, because I wanted to maintain that community feel. And that's what I'm going for with the merch, is letting really everyone who wants it be able to have it. I'm trying to make it as cheap as possible. And then all proceeds, all profits will actually be donated to a mental health foundation. So I just highly encourage coming and getting a t-shirt, because they're going to be going out quick. So yeah, Ishan, that's right. I've really just tried to maintain that community so far.
Yeah, so I will say one thing, especially with the merch. I remember one specific moment, I think last summer, you had the merch drop where you'd repost it on your story and everyone would get entered into a pool, and you selected a couple of people out of the pool. And I remember just scrolling through Instagram, every story that I saw
Yeah.
from people from all over the city, even people that didn't even live in Atlanta, lived a little bit outside doing that. So definitely bringing the whole community together, just not out, like, just, you obviously have the community set in our area, but people outside, people from various schools, colleges, even adults. I remember my mom was like, I kind of want a shirt now.
Well, yeah, I claim that was an intentional advertising move, but in reality, it just kind of stemmed from that. I didn't realize how many people were gonna repost that, and I actually, that's what really boosted the page a lot, and gained a lot of new traction, a lot of new followers and fan bases. So that was a really fun moment. Yeah, I remember that vividly.
So, I think this is a good place to wrap up now. We've talked about the podcast,
Yeah.
The Instagram, everything that Reilly's done, had a good conversation about the Hawks. So Reilly, thank you for coming on, man. I've been a big fan of the Instagram. I've made myself pretty active on the comment sections at time. And this was definitely going to happen at some time. So I'm glad we got this collab episode.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, Ishan, and getting to talk about the Hawks and Bucks series. That was fun. Falcons are going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Same with the Saints. The Saints are going to be an interesting team to watch too.
I hope so. So let's roll the red carpet. Plug what you have going on. Where can we find you? What are you doing? Just minute to plug everything you got going on, so everyone can check you out.
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, that's really the place that I'm most active. That's going to be ATL Sports Hub _ on Instagram. I'll be posting all sorts of stuff. And if you look on Instagram, you've got the new merch bubble right here that you can click on, and then you can slide up. You can take a look at the merch and then let me know if you're interested. The bulk order hasn't been placed yet, as I said. So if you are interested, just feel free to reach out. And even after the order's placed, I'm sure I'll have tons of extras. So just don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, ATL Sports Hub on Instagram. And then if you want to go catch some old episodes, you can find my podcasts, Atlanta Sports Hub, on wherever you find your podcast, Spotify, Apple. And I actually do plan to hopefully restart those, get them up and rolling again as periodically as I can. I talked to William and Ishan before, and that's why I really respect y'all's podcast, Triple Threat, because I was scrolling through Spotify, the amount of consistency y'all have. I know it's the summer, but still the amount of consistency y'all are able to produce these podcasts on, it's incredible. And I'm speaking from a former podcaster. That was definitely the most difficult part, was getting those out on a consistent basis. So really appreciate Triple Threat for having me on, and I appreciate all you guys are doing.
You're welcome anytime. So I think I do give us a little bit too much credit for the consistency, but I'll take it for sure.
Yeah, me too. But thank you, Reilly, for joining. And that's the episode. So as always, I'm Ishan Cheth. Alongside me, William Ezel, and today, Reilly O'Neal. And that's the Triple Threat Podcast, episode 46. Peace.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course.